The thing that I really love about learning Torah is that you can read the same story again and again, and we do that. We read the same stories year after year, and each time you read it, it will say something different to you. It might be that you're at a different stage of your life. You know, when you read it as a child, you think about all the mummies and the daddies in the stories. And when you read it as a parent, you think about the parent and child relationship. And, you know, it's got every life event in there. It's got from birth to falling in love and marriage and then eventually death and mourning. It's all there. Anything that you're going through in life, you're going to find it somewhere in the Torah. And at different points, different things will speak to you. So there's been something that's been on my mind a lot recently, and I think a lot of people as well. I've had loads of conversations with lots of different people, and it's been all over the papers and social media. What is the role of a woman nowadays in Judaism? Do we have a role? Should we have a role? Should we have more of a role? Can our role change? Should it change? How can it change? When should it change? And there's been a lot of discussion about it. And so when I read this week's Sedra, Parshas Pinchas, the story of the daughters of Zelophehad jumped out at me, because here you have a bunch of women, and they actually completely transform halacha for future generations. It's incredible. So these 5 women, they were the daughters of a man called Zelophehad, and he had died. And just now, Moshe is apportioning all the land in Eretz Israel, and it goes according to the father. Now, these girls don't have a father. What are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to be homeless? So they very carefully approach Moshe, and Moshe standing outside the Ohel Moed, very public place, the tent of meeting with everyone. He's there. Elazar the Kohen Gadol is there, all the Nasim, the princes, the whole congregation, all the men are standing there. And these 5 girls approach, and they say, you know, our father's dead, we don't have any brothers, and we would like to inherit. And Moshe actually doesn't say anything. He goes and asks Hashem because he's not sure what to do. And you know what Hashem says? He says, you know what? The girls are right. They should inherit. And from now on, that's the law. Everyone's going to inherit. If there's a man who dies without any sons, his daughters get to inherit. That's the law from now on. And it came about because these girls asked the question. Now, when I read this story, one thing was conspicuously absent. When these girls approached this massive group of men, not one of these men shouted at them, you know what, just be quiet and go home and make us a kugel or something, or a cholent, or a chicken soup, or whatever they ate back in the day. Nobody said that. Nobody said, you're overstepping, you're a bunch of girls, what do you know about Jewish law? Now, why didn't they say that? The commentaries actually have loads of praise about this group of women, ranging from they had amazing intentions, they genuinely loved Eretz Israel and they wanted a piece of it. They were very righteous, they were highly intelligent, and they had the whole of the argument backwards and forwards that goes on in the Gemara that they presented to Moshe as their logic for why they should stand to inherit. And he was, you know, blown away by the logic, as was Hashem, some of the commentaries say. And, you know, it goes on. The other thing that people say is that they approached very carefully and timidly, and they did it with a lot of respect. There wasn't a lot of fanfare. They weren't singing any songs or chanting, and they weren't waving their placards, and they weren't suffragettes with their badges. They just came and quietly asked nicely, and it was reasonable, and it was logical, and it was coming from a good place, and Hashem says, yeah, go for it. Now, the next question is, why didn't Hashem tell Moshe this at Har Sinai? Why does he wait for this situation to occur? And Moshe, the greatest Novi that ever lived, why didn't he foresee this and, you know, implement the law before they had to go through this? So Rashi says, actually, sometimes you can be very great and you don't see something because you've never experienced it. Moshe was not a girl who was orphaned, so it hadn't occurred to him. He hadn't been through that situation. These girls had. They were in the situation, so obviously they're thinking, well, what should I do about my situation? And that is sometimes how halacha evolves. And why didn't Hashem tell Moshe earlier on? Because actually he wanted the girls to be able to take hold of that halacha and to implement it themselves, to be responsible for that halacha coming to light. That's an incredible merit. So we know that halacha does evolve and develop over time. Each generation has new things that have never come up before, that weren't around at the time of Har Sinai. We didn't have electricity. We didn't have all the medical advances that we have now. So obviously there was no law to govern that. So we have to work out how our framework of halacha fits the new situation. So what's our new situation now? Our problem is that women are too educated. You know, going back a couple of generations, we knew nothing. Obviously, we weren't going to be communal leaders. But now, you know, Sarah Schneer came along and she said that all girls should have a Torah education. And, you know, suddenly the whole world had a Torah education. That was going back a couple of generations. And now, you know, we've finished high school and we're finished with SEM and we still want more and we're still learning more. So, you know, if you look what's happened in London over the last, you know, generation, LSJS has done an amazing job of training up loads of women educators because there was a need for it. There wasn't previously a need for it because women didn't know that much and women didn't want to know that much or couldn't know that much because that was just the way the world was. And now we're in a different place. So again, in the last few years, it's changed rapidly again. And there was even more of a need for women in leadership positions because actually, you know, today's generation of women were highly educated, we've got high-flying careers, we're very intelligent, and actually, you know, we want to get involved. You know, all these laws that govern our day-to-day life, you know, particularly in the area of family purity, because that, you know, is quite a big one for us and it's on our minds a lot. So suddenly Rabbi Mervis realizes actually we need a lot more women in leadership roles within the United Synagogue, and he set up an amazing program called Mayan program, which does just that. It trains up women to go out into communities and to be there, to be available for women to ask their questions to be supported by, to get advice from, and to be educated as well, and to learn together and to grow together, to give inspiration. And that is an amazing, amazing thing, an amazing achievement. And the Maya not actually have their own Facebook page now, if you want to get in contact with any of them and you feel like you actually need that female connection and you don't yet have it. But it's amazing, you know, most shuls have a hands-on rebbetzin who can handle a lot of, you know, any issues that come up, does a lot of the programming, a lot of the education. So we've got rebbetzins, we've got Mayanot, we've even got Yoatzot Halacha, and we have amazing female educators, and it's growing and growing and growing at a very rapid rate, which, you know, is a very nice problem to have, really. It's very positive. There's been a lot in the social media networks about how, you know, a lot of women feel maybe disengaged or like second-class citizens, that Judaism is sexist and there isn't a role for them. So I just wanted to present on a personal level my own experience. That's not to negate any experience that anyone else has had, because each person has their own experiences and those are very valid feelings to have if that has been your experience. But I just wanted to show that there is an alternative feeling as well. And this has been my experience, and I realise that I'm very privileged to have had this experience. But I just want to tell you about how it was for me growing up as a modern Orthodox, traditional family. So my parents are very much Torah and Derech Eretz, which means like a Torah outlook, but getting involved in the day-to-day world. My dad was a dentist, my mum was a nurse. All of my siblings and I have university degrees and, you know, a good secular education, which was an important thing in our home. But as well as that, the overarching theme was a Torah lifestyle. And how does that actually play out? So I would say my dad has a very traditional male role in that a lot of what he does is in the public domain. He is a Bal Koreh. He lanes the Parsha most weeks in various different shuls. And growing up, every Shabbos morning, I would wake up to the sound of him. He used to practice in the kitchen below my bedroom. And so I'd always wake up to hear the sound of him practicing the Sedra each week, which was amazing. And his literally favourite place to be is in the shul. He loves minyan. He very rarely misses a minyan if it can be avoided. He was one of those people that genuinely missed minyanim, davening in shul during lockdown. And he was desperate to get back to shul. And he's also a moel. He does bris milas. He's done many, many over the years. And he goes to regular shiurim and he loves it. It's literally Torah is like the thing that gets him going, that he lives for. And, you know, of course, on a personal level, in a private situation, he's very much a Torah Jew, but a lot of it is very much in the public domain. To contrast, my mother is very much, she stays at home a lot more. She's not in the public domain. And her Torah is a lot more of a private affair, I would say. So what do I mean by that? You know, over the years, you know, I've seen her every Shabbos light Shabbos candles. And, you know, she'll light the candles. she'll make the bracha, cover her eyes, and in that she stays in that moment for a good few minutes. I don't know what she's saying. She's not reading anything from a siddur. It's not anything that anyone's written down, but she has like a genuine private connection with Hashem in that moment, and she's just talking to him. He's just like an actual real person to her that she just has a direct line to. She doesn't need to be in a shul, she doesn't need to be in a minyan. He's just there, like he's just in her house, and she can just chat to him. And even in a day-to-day conversation, if I'm in the middle of talking to her, about something that's going on, or something bad that's happened in the news, or someone that's not well, she'll be mid-conversation and she'll just look up and start talking to Hashem to say, Hashem, you really need to make this person better, it's so terrible. And then she'll just carry on talking to me. Like, it's literally like he's in the room and she can just have a private conversation with him because he's just there. It's just a completely different way to relate. For my dad, he needs that regularity. He wants the 3 times a day, that it's a fixture in his life. For my mum, it's just everywhere and anywhere, and it's just a constant. And her outlook on life, her hashkafa, is very much a Torah one. And over the years, all the advice she's given me or any situation, she's always got a really good take on it. Not because she's sitting and learning, but she intuitively gets it. And, if you contrast the two, which is a better approach? I mean, obviously neither. They're both living a very Torah lifestyle, but in the way that suits them best. Now, that's not to say that no woman can connect in a shul and no man can connect at home, but those traditional roles often really work for people. And, there's nothing bad about that. That's a good thing. And actually, the Torah view on the role of a woman has always been to have women in the highest possible esteem, to put them on a pedestal as, the person that runs the home and the mother. And that's not to say they can't do anything else or that's all they are, but it's really important. And in today's world, we've somewhat devalued that, and we're like, oh, you're just a stay-at-home mum. That's a bit pathetic. I mean, maybe we wouldn't say that, but we might be thinking it. And, people have that feeling of like not being good enough. Like if you're not doing everything that a man's doing, then you're not good enough. But, there's such a value in actually being a woman. There was no bit of me growing up that envied my brothers and their role and thought to myself, I wish I was one of the boys, because I just saw a value in being one of the girls. And so as I was preparing for this year, I was thinking, well, that's very nice that was my experience, but clearly it's not been everyone's experience. And, times change a lot. Maybe it's a generational thing. And I suddenly thought, well, maybe my kids don't see it like that. Maybe they do feel inferior in some way. I've got 4 girls and a boy. And so I thought, what, I'm actually going to ask my daughter. My oldest daughter is 11. And I do talk to my kids a lot about my Parsha thoughts. So I said to her, what, Leora, I'm thinking about this thing I'm going to say about the Sedra. I just wanted to know, what do you think the role of a man and a woman is in Judaism? And I didn't qualify it in any way. And she straight away said, she went for a Tanakh example. She said, well, you've got someone like Devorah and you've got someone like Miriam. They were both female leaders, but very different. Devorah was very much in the public domain. She was in the spotlight. And Miriam was also a leader, but kind of on the sidelines. So I'm like, okay, interesting, go on. And then she carried on and she said, well, you've also got Moshe, who, he was in the limelight. He was the forefront, he was the main leader. But then you've also got leaders like Pinchas, he was quite a quiet guy, but he just acted in the moment. And, he took up a leadership role just when he needed to. I was like, oh, so what do you think about that? She's like, well, you know what? I just think it's a personality thing. Different people are different. I was like, good answer. Okay, so what about nowadays? So she says, well, you've got rabbis and you've got Rebbetzins. I was like, okay, go on. She said, well, they do different things. I was like, well, which one's more important? So she says, well, neither. You need both. I was like, okay, let's keep going. What about at home? How do you see my role and how do you see Daddy's role? So she gave me a whole list of the things that I do and a whole list of the things that her daddy does. And I said to her again, which one's more important? And she said, well, neither. I need you both to do the things that you do. They're really important, both of you. I was like, okay, great conversation. Okay, felt quite secure that, she felt good about being a Jewish woman. Left it at that. 5 minutes later, she comes back and she says to me, you know what, Mummy, I've just been thinking about it a bit more and I've come up with a concept. I was like, ooh, a concept, go on. So she said, well, I think it's a bit like a pot of ink and a feather. I was like, really? What do you mean by that? So she says, well, the men are like the pot of ink and the women are like the feather. I was like, in what way? So she says, well, the pot of ink contains ink. The container is the man, the ink is the Torah, and the feather is the woman. So the men contain it, but the women with, like the feather, they turn it into something. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And she said, and obviously each of them would be completely useless without the other. So there you have it. That is maybe the solution. But maybe you've got your own ideas. I'd love to hear them. Have a good Shabbos.